Okay, welcome everyone to this annual general meeting of Omokoroa Residents and Ratepayers Association. I'm Bruce McCabe, the chairman. To my left is John Palmer, the vice chair, and to my right, taking the minutes for the meeting, is Kathleen McCabe, the treasurer secretary. Now, one thing you'll notice I should highlight at the beginning is that we've got a video camera working at the moment, so the meeting is going to be recorded. We've done that so we can post it on the website so that all those people who don't feel the desire, I suppose, to front the evening air, they can watch it at their leisure at home. So, are there any apologies? We've received one from Craig Lemon, Omokoroa Town Centre developer. Any more? No more apologies?
Can I say, Tracy Coxhead, please? She would like to have come.
Right, Tracy Coxhead. If there are no more apologies, we'll note those as recorded, and a call for items of general business.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask that representation be put on the general business?
Thank you, we will do that. And there are two items of general business that have been identified earlier. Firstly, a summary of closed circuit television in Omokoroa. That was raised at the last annual general meeting, and we've also received a progress report on the Omokoroa Town Centre from Chase Corporation. Okay, any other items to be included in general business? Yes?
Just one, balance of presentations.
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Balance within the committee meeting.
Balance within the committee meeting.
Okay, we can put that on and discuss it towards the end of the meeting, not a problem. Okay, the minutes of the last AGM were circulated with the notice of AGM, so we'll take those as read. I move that the minutes be received as a true and accurate record of the AGM. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair. Paul O'Connor.
Paul O'Connor, second. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Passed. Now, there was one matter arising, but we're going to discuss that in general business at the end of the meeting, the CCTV coverage from Omokoroa, mainly because it's probably going to be could be a lengthy discussion. Now, moving on to the Chairman's report. Now, over the last year, our activities have been focused on 5 major items. Firstly, the government-directed changes to 3 waters, local government, New Zealand involvement in this as a pays representative of the government. Our submissions that we made to the annual plan 2023-2024. Elder housing, the key issue there is council's increased spending on a loss-making enterprise, which has, by the way, resulted in a very large rates increase. Fourthly, local body elections. We ran a Meet the Candidates meeting in Omokoroa. And fifthly, we, in conjunction with the Western Ward Ratepayers Association, ran a public meeting where David Seymour was guest speaker. Very well attended meeting, in excess of 200 people. His discussion focused on the 3 issues, namely 3 waters, changes to the RMA, and changes to local government, and they are major things that are going to affect all ratepayers. So starting with the government-directed changes. Now, the general consensus now is that these changes are designed to centralise decision-making and embed co-governance. They're not going to result in any improvements in efficiency or services or housing supply. By way of example, Three Waters, the bureaucracy spent on that so far is $3 billion before implementing anything. So you can imagine what the set-up costs are going to be before it gets going, and there's only one person that's going to pay for that, and that's the ratepayers or the water users, whichever way you look at it. And right through this process, local government New Zealand, it's an incorporated society, and it's meant to act in the interest of its members, and its members are local government. And right through this process, LGNZ has taken its direction from the government, accepted $1.3 million in funding to sell Three Waters to the local authorities. And it was really evident. We had a hard job trying to open this Three Waters crusade, locally led by our mayor at the time, to any public discussion. And the mayor was against it. No need to carry out any consultation. The councillors were initially very reluctant to get involved in any discussion. In fact, initially they were all for it, and only slowly, as they became aware that, hey, the costs of this outweigh any potential advantages, that they actually backed away from it, but they didn't do anything. We lodged a submission on the Water Services Entities Bill, outlining our objections and why. And we also supported Councillor Murray Benge's protest motion to withdraw from Local Government New Zealand. We actually instigated a emailing program into Council to try and get some support for that. It flooded the email system, so we know there was a lot of public support for the council to protest by exiting Local Government New Zealand. I mean, had they done it, the new council could have rejoined LGNZ, and at least then LGNZ would have known or would have felt that they'd been doing something wrong and not representing their membership. Now we also made a submission on the annual plan. Now the key points of this are, and I scanned through the Local Government Ratings Act 2022, and there's inconsistencies between policy and the other things that councils have to do to be recognised as a prudential manager of their assets, their incomes, their assets, their liabilities, and they fall down on that respect. And one of the things we are going to do is make an appeal to the Auditor General for him to review the way the council has gone about one key aspect of its spending, and that is its spending on elder housing, which is contrary to council policy, and it's also resulted in an opportunity cost to ratepayers that results in about a 6% increase in rates. Second thing we concerned about was a 10% increase in fees and charges, which is way above the inflation rate of 6.7 or so, and it's way above the target band that that we're meant to be working within of 1 to 3%. Then the third point was charging for Lagoima requests. Now, up until very, very recently, the CEO has not responded for our request for regular meetings so we can discuss issues and get information. And that's resulted in us having to rely on official information requests to prize information out of council. And we made 8 official information requests to get information about elder housing, and I think in total we made 15 Lagoima requests. Now, if the council's going to start charging for those, we're not going to be able to prize information out of them unless we break our requests up into single line requests, and one request that might be 10 questions will make 10 requests, and hopefully they fall within their charging envelope. Now, the big issue is this better off funding of $5.4 million, which is a payment from government to the council for them taking our water assets. So it's a payment to council, and then council have decided that, hey, the best thing to spend that on is elder housing and Maori housing. And that has resulted in a 6% increase, because that money that could have been spent on essential items like roading, water services, and what have you, has to be funded through rates. And the concern is that that expenditure on elder housing is actually contrary to policy, but the CEO seems to be a zealot for elder housing, and he is and has embarked upon an elder housing project without getting council approval, and the councillors don't seem to be able to stop him doing work on that project. And he takes the approach that if expenditure is included in the long-term plan, then he can spend that money, rather than going back to council to get approval to make sure it fits within council policy. So it would have been entirely feasible for the council to have levied a 0% rates increase, and that would have been helpful to a lot of people given the cost of living increase, particularly the younger property owners who are lumped with increased mortgage payments, increased living costs, and then they get hit again with increased rates. And if you have I've just taken the funding impact statement out of the long-term plan, and you can see that the quantified limit for rates increase for 2024 financial year is 4%, and the yellow band is where we sit at around 7%. So way above what we signed up to when the long-term plan was consulted on and approved. Now, the better off funding spent on elder housing. There's an elder housing policy, and I've taken it straight out of the longer-term plan for you to see 100% of the funding for capital, operations and maintenance is to be provided from rental income. I mean, that's quite clear. So the proposed spend of better off funding doesn't comply with that long-term plan revenue and financing policy, because you're taking money that could have been spent on other things and then putting it into elder housing. And to make things worse, the council appears to be taking the approach that it's a grant. It's free money, so we can spend it on elder housing without any consequences. But as I pointed out earlier, there's an opportunity cost that ratepayers are going to have to pay. So approval to spend the better off funding hasn't yet been given, and we got that through an Auditor General's opinion. And I go back to my concern that when council approves the spending listed in the annual plan, that spend on elder housing will be included, and that will be interpreted as approval for that spend, and thereby avoiding meeting policy requirements. So hence my comment that back to approval of the better off spending on elder housing. Now, elder housing financials are very interesting. I've highlighted what policy is earlier. that we've used a lot of Lagoima requests to get information on the finances. We've been to the Ombudsman with one complaint, and that was made over a year and a half ago, and we still haven't had resolution to that complaint. And we made one complaint to the Auditor General, and we got a response within a month, actually. And his opinion was that Council has approval to apply for the use of those funds, but it doesn't have approval to spend those better off funds if they get approval to spend them. Now, there was no approval to spend that $5 million in the long-term plan, so Council sort of ventured out and gone along that pathway, which I would consider to be poor governance. And a block of 7 units were constructed, new elder housing units were constructed in Beach Road and Katikati. Cost was 1.8 million, excluding the land cost, which was about $250,000. And I couldn't find any information about the approval, and it was actually approved at a confidential committee meeting and then ratified at a confidential council meeting. And I can't for the life of me see why. I mean, there are no commercial reasons why it should be confidential, but I'd be interested to hear from any councillor here as to why it went through a confidential process. And not surprisingly, elder housing continues to run at a loss, and I've managed to prize this information from Lagoima requests. So you can see how the indebtedness has increased, and as of June this year, it's probably about $3.3 million. So it's definitely a loss-making enterprise. We made written and oral submissions to Council opposing the spending of better off funding on elder housing, and at that time no financial business case had been provided, so all that decision making was going on without any financial figures to refer to in making that decision. After a lot of prizing, we've actually just received their financial modelling, so I've yet to go through that and see what it has to say. So that's the activity pretty much for the year. Committee membership, Ken Shirley, or Councillor Ken Shirley, had resigned upon his election as a regional councillor. Michael Smith resigned from the committee because of work commitments. So the current members are myself, the chair, John Palmer, the deputy chair, Kathleen McCabe, secretary and treasurer, Wayne Wright, David Partington, and Judy Sampson. The website, the grant that we got from the centre was insufficient to construct a website. We were able to get so far through the process, and we weren't able to progress any further. The balance of money we have been requested to pay back to the centre, which we have subsequently done, but we're receiving assistance from Gary to help get this site operational, and particularly getting the video of this meeting and the meeting at Katikati up so that members can look through that. But we would appreciate assistance from anyone able to help to construct a Google Sites website. I don't know whether there are any people around that you know, but if you do, point them in our direction. Meetings with the CEO. Previously, we had quarterly meetings with the CEO so we could work through issues and get information without having to use the official information process. After the current CEO had been on his job for a few months, we put a request in for meetings and got a nil reply. Then at a council meeting I was given assurance that a further request would be met with a positive response. And beginning of this week, I emailed the CEO, and the same afternoon he responded. He's agreed to meetings with the Omokoroa Residents and Ratepayers Association. So that's positive. Membership has dropped from 94 in the 2021-22 year to this financial year of 82. The unpaid membership stands at about 132. Now, we need a good sound financial basis to fund Lagoa requests, because I'm sure we're going to need them, because Council is not forthcoming with information, and we would also like to progressively develop the website so we can get information out to members who aren't able to attend meetings, particularly evening meetings. Okay, so the next item is the finances, and if Kath, if you could run through those, I'll put that up on the screen.
Well, our finances are fairly explanatory. We've got our subscriptions have dropped along with the numbers of our members. We've got donations of $42.90 and no grants either year. Our meeting costs have been fairly low, as the committee meets at our house and we meet at places like the boat club, which is wonderful, a wonderful service here. Little bit on printing, stationery and postage, and this one is going to become really important, our website, and so we are looking for some help with that. We have $3,075.09 in the bank. We have expenditure of $92.70. Now that has been about $72.70 was spent. If you remember, we had a meet the candidates meeting back before the local government meeting, before local government elections, and we've just received the bill now, so it's been a little bit of a delay, and $20 was on Google Suite, so that's where we stand today. Fairly simple. Any questions? Excellent.
Thanks, Kath. Now, I move that both the Chairman's report and the financial report be received. Do I have a seconder? Sandra Partington, second. All those in favour? Aye. Any against? Passed. Now, the recommendation from the committee is that the annual subscription remain as with previous years. Individual membership $10, household membership $15, associate $10, and business membership $50. I move that subscriptions remain as indicated above. Any second? Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman. Paul O'Connor.
Paul O'Connor. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Passed. Now, elections for the committee. Now, 6 members of the committee have not indicated they do not want to seek re-election, so are nominated. Now, we didn't receive any additional nominations, so those 6 members are deemed nominated. Now, there are 4 positions vacant. Now, do we have any nominations from the floor? Now, I think someone raised a point about the mix of the committee.
No, it wasn't about the committee. It was more about our presentations.
Okay, right. Now, do we have anyone here who would like to be nominated to the committee. I'm met with a wall of silence. Okay, no additional. Now, general business. First up is CCTV in Omokoroa. Now, Councillor Benge is going to speak to that. And I will just bring up her. What would you like up first, Margaret?
I've got the Omokoroa Road outside the caravan park and Parole Road.
Okay, I'll bring those up.
I had the request last year that if I could bring back where all the CCTV cameras are within Omokoroa and start and prepared this for me, I think, really quite well. And so, but I can't see where they are actually on the maps, but I hope you can. That you can see the little camera there. It's just opposite. Is it the
That's the caravan.
AGM? And it's an automatic number plate recognition, which is really quite important. The next one is on the Esplanade.
I'll bring that up. That's that one.
There's 3 there. 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
One
5.
down Beach Grove as well. Oh no, it's not Beach Grove. Where's that one? Right at the centre. And that's automatic number plate recognition as well. There's one on the roundabout that looks at the skate path and the roundabout.
Okay, that's no, not that one. Western Avenue. There we go.
So, and then the sports pavilion, stairway up, stairway down, left field, right field, and top floor, library front and internal. There's 6 there.
So when you say recognition of number plates, what happens to the data? Is it analysed at all?
It's kept by, it's got a 24-hour monitoring by the contractor Tarnix. So if it's wanted, it's available.
So if they see a hoon, does the hoon get identified straight away, or is it only upon a complaint? We have a lot of hoons in the car park across from the caravan park, and it's great to have vehicle number plate recognition, but if not much is done with the data, the question is it being
It's
used?
definitely monitored by Tarnix. They're based in Tapuki, and I know he could follow a hoon coming right through Bethlehem and right up here, and was able to work in with the police quite well. So I can't.
The police have access to the CCTV cameras and use it quite widely.
Oh, that's good.
But under the Land Transport Act, you can't issue traffic infringements of CCTV cameras.
I just want the police to turn up every now and again. No, we're up above the car park, and we hear them. We hear them sort of doing wheelies and donuts and so forth there, and it goes on for hours, not hours, extended periods of time.
David, that's a serious issue for Omokoroa. With the population you've got, you really are at the stage where you need a police station, or else a better police service. But there is enough antisocial behaviour going on out here to justify it. It's one I've presented to the community board, and on the issue, the community board is very aware, and so it's an election issue coming up, I'm quite sure. Mark Mitchell is speaking at Bethlehem 6:30 on Friday evening, and you can guarantee the place will be packed because people are really worried. And we keep getting left off being in a provincial centre, and so it's really important that we speak up, isn't it, Ken? Yes.
And don't get me wrong, this is really positive. I didn't realise there's so many cameras around.
Right,
It's
we
really,
need-
really good.
We need another one.
Yeah.
There's one at the boat trailer park and Freedom campsite area.
That one?
The Omokoroa domain,
Yeah, that's it.
there's plenty there. The boat ramp, and you can see one right down by the boat ramp. And also the playground area. There are 4 in the playground area, and that's, where's that? Goodness.
It's by the trees.
That one there.
Well, it says there are 4, and the reserve. So I can tell you that I've been nominated again to serve on the CCTV camera committee, and it's quite a good experience to be there. Richard Caulfield is representing Te Puke this time, Nakatu, and then the other one is Caddy and Waihi Beach, and that's Rodney Joyce. 2 good people to work with, and we have the police represented, and we have staff members there, so that the applications for the cameras is only 50,000, and that doesn't go very far, but it's interesting how staff will work and see how they can fund from other sections of the budget. So I think it's working out in quite a positive way. And I can take any questions if you would like. Don't necessarily have the answers, but happy to try.
Margaret, when is your next CCTV committee meeting, and when do they decide where to fund CCTV cameras in the next financial year?
Well, it's in the budget, 50,000 in the budget, and for this coming year, and so I can't give you the date when we actually sit and hear the submissions, but I'll find out and get to you so that you can put out with your report as to when the submissions will be called for and when the meeting is held. If I can get that information for you, Bruce, I will, all right?
Thank you.
Okay. And I've also got the structure plan. That was another thing that was actually I was asked to present. Do you want me to comment on that as well?
With the CCTV, is there a request for more CCTV cameras than what has actually been shown here tonight? Because
Yes.
really,
Yes,
the committee meeting that Margaret's talking about is to hear applications for more cameras.
I'd love to see one in the car park down the bottom of our hill, basically. That's that car park by the ITM, because a lot of people hang out there. Undesirables hang out there.
I look forward to your application, Dave.
I think you say look forward to me paying for it.
Sorry, could you
Yes,
say
sir.
it was 50,000 per camera or the budget?
No, the
50,000?
budget is 50,000.
And what's the cost per camera?
It's round about 4,000, but implementing them, there are different types of cameras. Implementing them is a bit more expensive. So it doesn't go very far, and I can't give you the specific details, but I promise you that I'm impressed with the way staff will work with us, plus the police, to actually how they could shift the cost of a camera into another budget. So I just need the applications, and I'll tell you where there is one required on the back end of the pavilion that overlooks the tennis courts, because there's not one there. And one poor girl coming home was accosted by someone so badly that she couldn't go to work the next day, and terrified she was. So who on earth was wandering around there, I don't know, but that's one here where I would really like to see an application come through. I can speak to the tennis club about it, but it would be oi from you, Bruce.
There is an existing camera on the corner of the State Highway in Omokoroa Road. It's been there for many years. It's an NZTA one for traffic monitoring purposes. Is that able to be incorporated into what is monitored?
No.
It doesn't have number plate recognition. It looks at vehicles side on, really. Traffic congestion and accidents is really why it's there for.
Right.
But it looks the same as all the others, so we would see it and think that there's a CCTV camera there for crime, you know, and monitoring antisocial behaviour. But bear in mind, we lost a lizard right there, but
So,
there's a separate camera required for the purpose for which we want the camera there, not just the purpose that the road traffic management people want it there.
they're not the easiest people to work with, I have to tell you, at all. But I'll take that on board and I'll make sure that we try and do something. All right, otherwise I'll let Bruce know and you can make application for another camera for there.
Yeah.
All right? So, do you want me to deal with the structure plan at the same time? The third structure plan. We're great at doing plans, I have to tell you, in local government. As the years have gone by, the one thing we're good at is doing a plan. Now, we may not necessarily follow it, but that's absolutely beside the point. We will, in fact, produce them. The structure plan for stage 3 in Omokoroa was notified on the 20th of August 22 as part of the plan change 92. Omokoroa and Tapuki enabling housing supply and other matters. And you'll know that was when Judith Collins, and what's the Labour woman's name? Don? They came to Megan Woods, and they came to an agreement that they could go 3 stories high, and you didn't have to get anybody's approval, and that was sort of what they did. They didn't take into account that not everybody might like it, and I know it has been adjusted, but that's part of this process. We received submissions on the plan change, including specific submissions to the structure plan itself. Staff are currently working on planner reports that will be presented at the hearing, which is expected to occur in September this year. Changes to the structure plan in response to submissions are likely to be presented as part of that process. We are aiming to have a decision on the plan change in December this year. The plan change, including the structure plan for stage 3, will become operative at that point. The strategy and policy workshop agenda for the 13th of April, available to you on Stella Library, provides details relating to the submissions and plan change process. Omokoroa and Tapuki enabling housing supply and other matters as well. So I can tell you that when we did the structure plan for number 2, second structure plan, it was really well submitted to everybody. And then when we had someone actually discovered that in the middle of the commercial area, there was actually someone who wanted to do something. And staff were very reluctant to actually take note of that until this organisation held a public meeting at, where did you do that? At Settlers Hall, and you had such a great response that suddenly the staff started to talk about holding back on this structure plan number 3. And I think that was, for the work that you do, you'll be to be commended, because there's nobody else that you can turn to actually look at something alternative to what the council is doing. And I may try, like I did with that local government association. I've been in local government a long time, and what really cheeses me off is that they don't listen. And in local government association, you had Stuart Crosby, an experienced mayor. Not sure that he actually did a great deal for Tauranga, but that's absolutely beside the point. He was the president of that association, representing all we councils. And what did he do? He did a trade with the government, took the money, and then proceeded to support them on the 3 waters. So you've had a lot of, Ken Shirley will, I'm sure, will follow through on that tonight anyway. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer questions, but that's me.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Any questions?
It's a rotten meeting at night to come out, and the least you can do is put me under pressure.
When's the Prong Road roundabout going to be done?
Oh, they're starting. Yes, sir. They're starting.
So a couple of things, just, I mean, I'm not a member actually, so I could chuck me out, but But the police are having tea up at Cattycat, and they'll never get here in time to do it.
No, they're out on the entrance to Omokoroa when we came through.
Well, they?
Yes, there's a number of them.
I went to find home for fish and chips at the station. Anyway,
And they'll take your membership before you leave.
I was just a little bit surprised that you found trouble finding your way around the photo of Omokoroa. But I'll leave that for the moment. But I do notice, and I've heard you speak a couple of times, you tend to say, you should do this and you should do that. We have elected you to do this. And I sort of did this part of the speech once before at the community board. But, you know, my feeling is that you and your fellow are, what I described down there is golden retrievers lying in front of the fire waiting for your bellies to be scratched. What we expect when we get things like rodent problems, and we get things like needing police here, we don't want you guys, we didn't elect you guys to say you guys should talk to the Ratepayers Association, you guys should make a submission, you guys should apply for a camera. We expect you to be the rock wheelers. I expect you to be at the end of the chain with drool coming off your bloody chin, all right, having a go on our behalf. That's what we elected you for.
Right, well, I'm a Kaimai Ward councillor.
There's nothing personal, I do this all the
No.
time.
I'm a Kaimai Ward councillor, and I'm responsible from wherever our boundary is on Pahoia Road beyond that, back from that now, and right through to Welcome Bay. And so on the 23rd of this last month, I had 150 people at the Kaimai Hall. Nobody asked me to do it. I did it myself. I lined the people up from Old Kaimai Road, Soldiers Road, Pari Road, and Omanoa Road and Belk Road. And I could only do that myself. I contacted Simeon Brown, I got him to come, and because nobody will listen. And I can only work so many hours in the day, and when I say the people are behind me, I'm powerful. And when the people aren't, I can do nothing. So, sir, you have a job to do, and I don't apologise. And I did speak about the police station. I did speak at the community board that you were at. We need it. I chaired the community committee. The mayor has stuffed up the terms of reference. I'm trying to get those changed so it has a meaningful role to do, but I'm more than happy to actually, and I must tell you, from that meeting at Kaimai, I then met the group of those women and a couple of men at the Falls Cafe the following Saturday, and I said, Linda, you should, no, not Linda, well, call her Linda anyway, she's married to Paul, you should be the chairman, and I said, and Lee, you should be her deputy. Nobody argued with me, and so tomorrow night they will formally become the Omanoa Kaimai Ward Ratepayers Association. That's what you call grabbing people around and walking the talk. And then I go to the combined meeting of Regional Council, Western Bay and Tauranga City, and we have the chairman is Anne Tolley, and we're talking about combining and making sure that we all go together to ask the government to get off its chuff and get on with the roading for State Highway 2 and State Highway 29. As you know, the cost of housing is prohibitive and people cannot afford to live here. And so unless we open up more land, and you can't do that unless the roads are in place, it's vital that in fact we keep the pressure on. So I can tell you that Simeon Brown has said they will do, they'll do the second stage of State Highway 2 up to the Omokoroa, and that's after Michael Woods, who's been tossed out. That was after he took it off the 10-year plan, and it was meant to be 4 lanes by 2015. Mr. Chairman, I've said enough. But there's work to be done, and all I can say is I
Mr.
keep
Chairman, I'm
going.
very happy to hear that Margaret does have some Doberman.
Yeah. I just wish some of the men did have two.
Thank you, Margaret. Now, the next item of general business is a report from Chase Corporation on the development of the Omokoroa Town Centre. Now, you will have seen a fair bit of earthworks going on that site. Craig has provided me with an update. He's overseas, so he can't present it, but I've just summarised it so you get a feel for it. His report will be attached to the minutes of this meeting, which will circulate fairly shortly. So, wet summer, but the stage 1 earthworks were completed. This involved construction of erosion and sediment control systems, which I don't think you can see from the road. Removal of a lot of uncontrolled fill from the gully, and then backfilling with a pumice drainage blanket, and then placing a clay cap on the pumice and regrassing that to prevent erosion. So that stays in place until the next earthwork season. So stage 2 earthworks are due to start September or October of this year. The objective there is to achieve the finished landform for the primary commercial area. And then to start the civil works, namely the roading, stormwater and wastewater. Now, site planning. Now, reading between the lines, I think he's saying that council have not been particularly helpful in this regard. They've been continually trying to work out changes to Omokoroa Road, and these are impacting the internal roading and finished levels at the site. So those changes include elevating the height of Omokoroa Road and forming a dual lane roundabout entrance to the Omokoroa Town Centre. So you can see how if the road comes up and it widens, it really increases the slope down to the site, so they've got to change everything. So they've got an existing resource consent, but it may be that those council changes are going to require changes to that resource consent. At the very minimum, they're going to make changes to roading and stormwater and wastewater systems. So they're still in discussion with the Ministry of Education, who own the neighbouring site where the schools are going to be developed. They want to talk about sharing of information for site layout so they can get their levels between the two sites working, access points and where services are going to run for the two sites. Unfortunately, the Ministry of Education project manager has recently resigned, so they've got to start this process again when the new one is appointed. Public updates are available on the Omokoroa Town site website. The most recent update is of the 13th of March, and people will be able to communicate directly with Chase through that website, so people got concerns or queries. Once Chase get things ironed out with the council, in other words, what that road is finally going to look like, then they're going to provide us with a briefing and we'll be able to relay that information to all our members. Okay. Now, were there any other items of general business, Kath?
Yes, there was one that was raised, and that was the gentleman at the back who may want to talk.
No, I'll let that one go actually, thank you.
Pardon?
I'll let that one go actually.
Okay. Are you sure?
Yeah.
We would love to hear from you, sir.
Well, okay, just a minor thing. It's more the fact that it is a Residents and Ratepayers Association, and in the last year we've had 3 speakers, and 2 we've had so far, 1 tonight, who I'm sure are all very interesting, but they're all from the ACT Party.
What?
Mine, effectively. And just like we've got 3 national government representatives in the region and one Labor minister, and we've got people on the council, it would be probably a good idea to be a bit more balanced in the people we get to speak, even though these are very interesting. No personal thing against them at all, but it does almost seem like a branch of the Hat Party a little bit.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, may I answer that?
You can have first cut at him and then I'll
The first and the last thing you ever do is to ask people how they vote in a general election. I know from Article 3 of the treaty I'm equal to everyone I meet and they are equal to me. There's no rock-wheeler in me. I just try and do my best. And I don't care how people vote in a general election. It's my job as a local government representative to encourage people to think about what's going on in the area and who can solve the problem. We do have to work with central government. It's logical because they've got all the money, they've got all the power, and you want to work with people who can actually make a difference. Why did I not get anybody up to that Kaimai Hall other than the opposition? Well, I had to listen to that Angie Warren Clark tell us back in 2017 they weren't interested in big roads, they were only interested in road safety. So what happened? The whole of the infrastructure machinery left our bay and it'll take time for them to build up again. Ken Shirley can vouch for that. I don't care how he votes in a general election. I want to make sure that the issues we face, that there can be resolved. And I'll work with anybody, even you, sir, if I thought that you could help me in that regard. So that's our job.
That doesn't answer the question. The point was that, you know, whether it be someone from the government who needs to be answerable or someone from the National Party who has got a different opinion, it's better to have a wider group of speakers at our meetings than just from one minor party.
I suggest you come and sit on the council meeting from time to time, because this is about local government. It's not about central government, it's about local government. What happens here? Have we got enough houses? How do people get on our roads? And what do we want to do as far as the safety goes? And I just don't understand what you're trying to say.
Well, we've had no one from local government speaking. Oh, apart from tonight.
Well, you could actually arrange for someone and recommend to Bruce. If you can get someone who's willing to come along, I'm sure you'd be interested, wouldn't you, Bruce?
Absolutely.
So it's over to you, sir.
Well, that'd be fine. I'm not being critical, I'm just pointing out.
If I can also not be critical, but just point out a few facts. The very first speaker we had was apolitical, you know, Willem de Lang, professor from the University of Waikato, discussing sea level rise and how earthquakes and land stability in Omokoroa, all directly relevant to residents. And he was speaking from not a political perspective, but from a scientific perspective of a person who'd spent probably 40 years of his life monitoring those sort of things in Tauranga, so totally apolitical. You know, Meet the Candidates meeting, we tried to extract information on a range of political views. Probably the most obvious thing was a lack of information coming from politicians. So what we've had to do, and councillors do not engage with the community they're meant to represent.
Apart from Margaret.
Apart from Margaret, I agree, she has to be commended for that. And we have to go and extract or get information from people we can. And Labor has, and Greens have the ear of the media, and it's very hard to get unfiltered information back to the community. So we tend to focus on people who can provide that. But if you've got any suggestions, by all means make them, because we're here to help the community make informed decisions and try and help councillors make decisions that are informed by the community. So we're in the middle of the information railroad.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, that's the formal part of the meeting over, and we'll move over to our guest speaker. I'll ask John to make the introductions.
Thanks, Bruce. Our guest speaker tonight is Ken Shirley. Ken is a resident of Omokoroa. He's also, last October, was elected as a Western Bay of Plenty member of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. He has a lot of experience in a governance role. He was a former member of Parliament. In fact, he was a member of Parliament for 15 years. In that time, he held the Ministry of Fisheries and the Associate Minister of Agriculture and Associate Minister of Health. He was also, for a long time, Deputy Leader of the ACT Party.
Oh, you shouldn't say that.
That he is concerned that the character and functioning of local government is uncertain and is in a state of considerable flux. Initiatives driven by the current government are all focused on a more centralised model with reforms to the Resource Management Act, 3 waters and many more policies under a co-governance umbrella. Local bodies are being burdened with increased financial imposts while community-based control and accountability is whittled away. So with that, I will leave it to Ken to elaborate, and would you like the microphone?
I've got one here, I think, is that?
Oh, that's,
I need as well, don't I?
Yeah.
Right. I probably don't need it actually, you can probably hear me, can you? So I'll go without the microphone. Well, good evening everyone, and thanks for coming out on this wet and cold evening. As John said, I was elected to the Regional Council last November. My first term Regional Councillor. Really find it very interesting actually, quite challenging, frustrating, all of those things. Yeah, there are some very interesting developments. I'd just like to touch on some of those, some of the big growth issues facing our region, and some of the transport issues and the restructuring issues for local government that are right, not just in the pipeline, they're starting to really impact on us. I guess when I became a regional councillor, because I was on the executive of the Resident Ratepayers Association, so I sort of did that reverse thing. I sort of went from gamekeeper to poacher, I suppose, in a way, from going from the gamekeeping role of the Resident Ratepayers Association to what I call the poaching role of the government. I'd also like to comment, Margaret Benge, it's a delight to work with her as a council with the local district council, and she certainly has that appearance of a docile, cuddly Labrador, but she is a cross between a Rottweiler and a Doberman. She is a very effective, staunch advocate, and many of her councillors tremble whenever she gets onto their case. She's doing a fantastic job, and it's a delight to work with you, Margaret. You really are a great representative for our region. The Regional Council, as you're probably aware, is quite extensive. It goes from Waihi Beach right to East Cape, and from Makatu right through to the headwaters of the Rangataiki up the back of Taupo on the Napier Taupo Road. So it's quite a vast area, population of 200,000, and it's not me, is it? Oh, that's terrible, unforgivable. Rule number 1, turn your phone off. Sorry about that. So the functions are sort of water and soil conservation and management, flood protection and drainage schemes, navigational safety, both maritime and our lakes and rivers, public transport, pest control, plants and animals, civil defence, the Clean Air Act, geothermal resource, very big round Rotorua, regional parks and regional planning. The Regional Council has assets of $1 billion, total equity of $600 million, and on the income front, general rates are $36 million, targeted rates are $37 million, and we have a high proportion of targeted rates because the big drainage schemes like the Rangataiki, those pumping stop bank drainage schemes, Rangataiki, Whakatane, the Kaituna area. They are big ticket items, but the beneficiaries from those pay for the bulk of it. It's an 80-20 ratio within those schemes. Subsidies and grants are 23 million, mostly subsidising the public transport from government, but there's still 30 million of your rates go into public transport, so you pay a lot for buses to drive around empty. Fees and charges is 13 million. Investments is the big one, that's 47 million income from investments. 40 million of that is the dividend from Quayside, and that's owned 100% by the regional council, and Quayside in turn owns 54.1% of the ports of Tauranga. So it's quite a big subsidy to rates. And of course the ports of Tauranga in turn own 50% of Northport, Whangarei Port. They also own 27% of the ports of Timaru, 100% of Metroport in Auckland, plus interest in the Ruakura, Rangiuru and other freight hubs around the country. So in a way, you as ratepayers are really the beneficiary, or really the true owner of all of those assets around the country. And that's sort of channeled through the regional council. I saw on the chart that Bruce put up that the Western Bay District Councils are looking at a rate increase of 7.79%, I think it was.
It was. They've got it down to 7.04 now.
Right, yeah, and you expressed outrage at that. The regional council rate increase is 11.95%, and that's in spite of a 40 million input from Quayside, the ports of Tauranga beneficiary. So that really alarms me. Local government has been spending way above inflation all around the country, and I'm certainly not happy with that. A lot of it is government imposed. More and more functions are being imposed on local government without the means of funding it, particularly in the infrastructural area. We can sort of come on to that later. So there's some real issues there, and part of this restructuring of local government in the pipeline is sort of a function of that. So I thought we'd first look at the regional growth, and in many respects in this region we are victims of our own success. But growth comes with problems. But what you've got to remember, when you've got shrinking or degrowth, that's even worse. that brings bigger problems. So our problems are the rate of growth and the whole urban form and transport in Western Bay that has to go with that. It is the fastest growing region in the country. We've got the worst, this is Tauranga and the Western Bay District Council, the worst housing affordability in the country if you take the house price to income ratio. But statistics can be deceptive, and I think it's partly explained, not entirely, but what you have, the character of this region is you have a lot of retired people, a lot of retired farmers, a lot of people from captains of industry and all around the country come to this area because it's a nice place to live. They tend to be often finished work, so they haven't got a high income, but they can afford very nice above average houses and properties. And also traditionally the other end of the scale, we were for many years regarded as the $10 an hour town, Tauranga and the region, because of the low income jobs in horticulture and elsewhere relative to others. That's probably $25 an hour now or somewhere around there. But you put those two facts together and you do get a bit of distortion when you say that we've actually got that worst affordability, because there is a structural characteristic that partially explains it. But housing is unaffordable here. We do have the highest prices, and a lot of people are really struggling to find housing. You couple that with the growth and the demand, and it really creates a very serious problem, a wicked problem to solve. The population, believe it or not, has increased 85% in the Western Bay in the last 5 years. 85% population increase. 200,000 additional population is projected by 2030, and that's not far away. That's a doubling. So another doubling by 2030. That's the rate of growth that we're having to deal with. 95,000 new homes are going to be required to house that increase. We've got a third of New Zealand exports through the Port of Tauranga. 40% of the Port of Tauranga's freight is via State Highway 29, that's the one over Carmais. And there's a 50% freight volume increase projected by 2030. So another 50% increase. So if you think you've got a lot of trucks now, you ain't seen nothing yet. Just to give you one example, the new Windstone factory going in at Tauriko, that's a very big plant. 85 truck movements of product per day, 6 days a week, getting the jib board out of that plant. On top of that, all the gypsum that goes into the jib boards got to go from the port up to Tauriko. So that's just one example of the sort of issues you get when you get this level of growth. Plus, on top of that, there's going to be an additional 227,000 trips per day by 2030. So we've got some big congestion in front of us. The Tauranga City Council has identified growth areas in the Tauriko Western Corridor and the Papamoa extension. This is across the Kaituna River, virtually to Makatu. So Papamoa will virtually go to Makatu under the development. And the Western Bay of Plenty District Council, we know the high growth areas that have been nominated. It's Omokoroa, Tipuki, and the concept of an eastern city around the Rangiuru area, which is by the Tipuki Golf Course or the Rangiuru Industrial Park. Now, turning to the Tauriko Western Corridor, because this is what's driving a lot of the issues and the competition and the demand for funding. The urban expansion cannot occur without significant transport investment. That's obvious. Kungaora, sort of used to be Housing Corp, it's now Kungaora with a much broader brief. They've nominated the Western Corridor, Tauriko Western Corridor, as a special development project. Now this is backed by legislation. There's none in the country yet. There's only 2 on the books. One is the Tauriko West Corridor. The other one is the Pororua Basin down in the Wellington region. And it comes with incredible centralised power to virtually direct, and it's government's response to the housing crisis that the country has been facing. But I mean, it's incredibly powerful, and we'll come on to some of the other aspects that go with it. So Tauriko West is virtually from, if you think of the State Highway 29 to the right through the Wairau River, all of that farmland is planned for housing in the very near future. Massive development there. All around Kino Road and the Tauriko Industrial Estate. 10,500 housing units there. And then a further 20,100 housing units, Bells Road, Upper Joyce Road and Merrick Road. That's a population of an additional 40,000 people. No, that's massive. State Highway 29 Network Corridor business case was signed off by the 3 councils. That's the Western Bay, the Regional Council and Tauranga City, just a fortnight ago, I think, wasn't it? Week before last. So it's a recent sign-off. We're all on the one page and the councils are all together on this. But what it means, 4 stages over the next 30 years, price tag of $2.25 billion. 2.25 billion. I did a little exercise in my head because we sort of hear a billion there, a billion everywhere, a billion, you know, just throw it around. You know, it's not a lot of money, it just comes and goes. $1 billion is a lot of money. And just putting it into sort of perspective, if you take a ream of copying paper, you know, this sort of little square ream of copying paper, and if every one of those sheets of paper in the ream was $1, there's 500 sheets in a ream, all right? And it's 5 centimetres thick or high, if you lie it down. So on that basis, if each sheet of paper is $1, then $10,000 would be a metre high. There'd be reams of paper stacked a metre high. $1 million would be 100 metres high. And $1 billion would be 10 kilometres high. So the $2.25 billion for this project that we're talking about is 22 kilometres high. It's reams of paper stacked 22 kilometres high. That's twice the height of international aircraft travel. You know, you can see these planes way up high. Twice that height. Dollar bills stacked up. That sort of just brought it home to me, just how much money that actually is. And it's so easy for government to spend $1 billion here, $1 billion there, throw it around, and it all comes out of your pocket, essentially, or out of the wealth of the country. So what do we get for our $2.25 billion? A new 6-lane state highway 29A from Takatimu Toll Road to Barks Corner. So 6 lanes there. A new 4-lane state highway 29 corridor between Takatimu and out to Redwoods Lane, heading on up towards the Kaimais. A new 2-lane corridor from Redwoods Lane to Omanua Road with a possible 4-lane bridge. There's a lot of arguments saying, well, if you're going to go that far, you should think ahead beyond that with 4-laning further up the Kaimais and have a 4-lane bridge across the Omanua River, and that's just south of the power plant, if you can place where the Omanua River comes out there. 7 intersection improvements, including 3 grade separated interchanges, 1 at Redwoods, 1 at Takatimu, and 1 at Barks Corner. So the Western Bay District Council are going to lose their office at Barks Corner, obviously. They're going to have to move somewhere. They might move to Omokoroa or somewhere anyway. Integrated walking and cycling network. Bus priority with signalisation and bus lanes, with a public transport hub at Tauriko Crossing, connecting through to Cameron Road and then right through to Mount Maunganui. So you'll have an arterial public transport virtually from Tauriko Crossing through to Cameron's Road, down Cameron's Road through the CBD and out to Mount Maunganui. So if we then look at State Highway 2, that's just State Highway 29. But wait, there's more. We've got the Takatimu North Link Stage 1, that's under construction, as we know, the bridge across the Wairau River, out to Loop Road at Te Puna. Stage 2 is a sad story, that's Te Puna to Omokoroa, that's what particularly impacts on us. It was approved in 2015, so it was across the line. But it was cancelled by the new government, and Michael Wood, the then Minister of Transport, actually specifically said, I'm taking that money, actually said stage 2 of the Takatimu North Link, that's the Te Puna to Omokoroa, to build the Auckland Harbour cycle crossing. They spent $15 million on consultants, and that project doesn't exist anymore, and we haven't got the money back. So, you know, that's a sad story there. The other troubling thing is what's happened is that all of these projects and the roads of national significance all around the country were done through the National Land Transport Fund. And that's what's called a hypothecated or sort of ring-fenced fund. So all your fuel excise duties, all your motor registration, all the road user charges went into that fund and as a user pay, and that funded the highways development and the maintenance. But that fund has fallen apart for a whole raft of reasons. The principal 3 ones are that with electric cars, they don't pay in anything yet. So although they're heavy with their batteries and wear out the roads, they don't contribute because they don't pay petrol and they don't pay road user charges. So the government's got to address that so that the fund is shrinking. The other problem was the new government decided to fund rail projects out of the National Land Transport Fund. So what was contributed by road users, Kiwi Rail now builds rail developments. And there's been some real doozies there. Remember the Napier to Gisborne rail went out, and they spent 25 million extending it to Wairoa, because it's all the logs have to come into Napier Port on the train. They built a rail hub for the logs at Wairoa. At best, they ever had one train a week, and every train lost $250,000. And now there's no trains there. And yet we spent all that money on that route. And the reason, of course, in forestry, you can't have a railway line going out to every skid site in the hills, so you've got to put it on a truck. If you're out in a forestry block at Wairoa or even up to Gisborne, once it's on the truck, it's either to go right to the mill or right to the port, because the double handling is a killer. And the concept was just wrong. People told them that, but they wouldn't listen. They just insisted on doing it because we had to have the rail reinstated, and it's been washed out twice with the unfortunate storms we've had as well. So yeah, it's very sad that we've lost that. I think we will get it back. The other aspect of that stage 2 is that Kungaora, the housing corp, with their new powers and money blocks, they've been told that they can't develop in Omokoroa, and you know we're going to be 12,000 by 2035 is the projection, and it's all of that land from Prol Road right out to the highway. There's a bit of industrial land out by the highway, but all of that land is earmarked for high density, intensive, affordable housing, and Kungaora are very keen to get underway. They are actually throwing in 45 million of taxpayers' money to speed up the new roundabout, the Youngston Road, Omokoroa turn-off, Francis Road roundabout, 45 million, and it's temporary, because that will not be compatible with the new stage 2 Takitimu north to Omokoroa, which has separation at grade, you know, with flyovers and all the rest of it. So it might be 5 years, it might be 10 years, but it's just 45 million will just be torn up and thrown away after that. So the fact that we stalled it back in 2015 with all the escalation of prices and trying to build up capacity with contractors and teams to do these works comes at a very big cost to taxpayers. The other investments on State Highway 2, of course, in Western Bay region, is the 1.7 kilometre Bay Fair to Bay Park. And I'm sure you've all watched that over the last 4 or 5 years. It was announced today. It's the most expensive national highway, state highway in the country ever, on a kilometre basis. And the price today was put at $300 million. Now that's compared with 262 million last year, 150 million in 2020, and in 2015 when it was started, 100 million. So the price has escalated threefold since 2015. So that's the problem we've got with infrastructure and price escalation. And people sort of blame COVID and all that sort of thing. And yes, that's contributed, but there's a much bigger, worse story behind it. And of course also a key priority is Hewlett's Road, Hull Road and Tokesha Street. They are key priorities too in the regional transport plan. So they're the big tickets. So I thought it'd be useful just to put in perspective our urgent need here in Omokoroa in that context. But the three councils have all said, and in the previous regional transport plan, they didn't put the priority here. And that was a mistake because they thought it was in the National Land Transport Program and it wasn't. It had been taken out. So we won't be hoodwinked again. And now all of those projects are all going up to government as part of the regional needs in the Western Bay of Plenty Council. But the funding buckets have all changed, and now you've got a plethora of different funding buckets like Kungaora. You've got to go everywhere to put the money together to actually get the projects underway. So that's the sort of the transport and the growth issues. I'd then like to just turn to some of the RMA reforms and the impact and the changes that are going to occur to local government. And I don't know where it's going to land. I don't think anybody does, but it's in a very fluid state of flux at the moment, no question of that. So what we have the RMAs to go, there's the substituting legislations in the pipeline, and the House, I think, had the third reading of one of them just last week. So we've got the Spatial Planning Act, the Natural and Built Environment Act, and the Climate Adaptation Act. And part of the Climate Adaptation Act is sort of what's called managed retreat. And this is sort of responding to climate change, but it's all well and good, but if you don't get the balance right and it becomes a dogma, it could be very destructive. Like people are already talking about abandoning farming on the Rangitikei Plains, that it's all just swampland, it's all pumped drainage, the stop banks like Edgecombe stop banks failed a few years ago, we should stop spending money there and just let it revert to flax bushes. These are real philosophical dogma that is out there right through the councils of just abandoning the Rangitikei Plains. And other examples around Kaituna, if you've seen all that wetland, we've now got between Puki and Makatu, a lot of very productive maize and dairying there, but not this year. I've just been, all the cows are gone, all the grass has died. We used to pump about 3-4 hours a day. It's now pumping 24/7, huge expensive diesel. And of course the Kaituna is fed by Lake Rotorua and Lake Rotoiti down through the Kerry Falls there. The gates have been open full, they have to be. Those lakes up there are the highest they've been. There's flooding all around those lakes because that's the header tank, if you like, for the Kaituna. So the Kaituna river bed's higher than the surrounding ground, and the water tables are up, and you're really just pumping groundwater. And I mean, that's just futile. So I think it's an abnormal situation we've had this last year. If you look at the cumulative rainfall in the last 12 months, it's something like 40% higher than the previous highest cumulative rainfall for that period in 70 years of record. So it's hopefully a phenomenal one-off. If it is the new norm, we're in deep trouble. And anyone who knows the problems of the Omokoroa Golf Club would appreciate just how this year has been very difficult to deal with. So unfortunately, all of these changes in the pipeline are full of uncertainty. We've got new regional planning committees. So at the moment, the regional council has a role of preparing the regional plan, but under this, it's all centralised, government appointees, and with a fierce co-governance. So government will be appointing co-governance onto those regional planning committees. It's a recipe for years of litigation to establish precedents. You can imagine the lawyers will love it. They'll have years of trying to sort this lot out as we throw everything out. And in all of the legislation, co-governance is enshrined. And look, I'm all for greater and better Maori representation and involvement. That's important. But we've got 30 iwi and 250 hapu in our region, and it's very prescriptive legislation. You have to consult, not only consult, there has to be representation, paid for representation from all of those groups on all of the issues that will be under this new legislation, which is just about everything you do. Everything you build, all your resource management, all aspects of it. And how that's going to shake down, I really don't know. They've also set up a Maori review panel, which was actually in the legislation granted powers to review decisions of the Environment Court. So you can take things through the Environment Court, and then there's a Maori review panel can review the decision of the Environment Court. Fortunately, the Chief Justice came out and said, look, this is a constitutional outrage, and they've pulled back on that. But it's just a sort of an example of the sorts of uncertainties and quagmires that we're in the process of creating. The other big instruction in all of the legislation was the previous RMA had, the concept was that you had to have regard to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, but now that's been changed. You have to give effect to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, which is a very different meaning in law. And of course the principles of the treaty are evolving and they're morphing. Every month there's sort of a new concept introduced, and there's no basis in law to actually what they are. So what we've had is the executive of government, that's the government departments, internal affairs and all the others, they've had some real activists there for about 10 years driving these things. We've had the judiciary, a very activist judiciary, also making decisions that have been driving it. I'll give you an example. A recent decision from the Waitangi Tribunal in Northland, actually their decision said that Māori didn't cede sovereignty in Northland. Now Article 1 of the treaty is having a common sovereignty. We are one nation, we are all part of a single sovereignty. But we've got a Waitangi Tribunal, which is not binding on government, but it's a recommendation, is that sovereignty was not ceded. So where do you go to from there? Where it's not co-governance, it's actually co-sovereignty and multinationalism within law. So that gets very confusing. So we've got uncharted waters. I actually blame the legislature, the elected parliament, for this, because it's all happened by default. You've got three pillars of government. You've got the legislature, which is the elected representatives. You have the executive, which is the doer, the government departments, and you have the judiciary. And that's the separation of powers, and the way they interact is what gives a stable, open democracy. But what happened is, by default, with an activist executive and judiciary, and are sitting on their hands, dragging their feet, parliament and legislature, the country has never had a discussion on these big constitutional issues of how does co-governance sit? Is the treaty a partnership or not a partnership? Because that's a recent creation also, and it comes with all sorts of legal implications. So this is where we sit. Now all of this is dumped upon local government, and just to give you an example, the regional council that I'm a councillor of was the first council in the country to have Maori constituencies, and we had 14 councillors, and of that three Maori constituencies. But in Western Bay of Plenty, it takes 6,000 votes to get elected. In Tauranga City, it takes 8,000 votes. Rotorua, 6,000 votes. Eastern Bay, 6,000 votes. But in the local Maori one, it takes 1,200 votes to get elected. In the Rotorua Maori seat, it takes 1,800, and in the one down Eastern Bay was uncontested. But that's just an example of voting power and how does that fit into representative democracy and co-government. So all of these issues are before us. Where it's going to land, I really don't know. We've got a general election in October with different parties having different positions, and but it's going to be like putting the toothpaste back in the tube, quite frankly. It's going to be very difficult and messy to try and sort it out. And the sort of business rule is function before form. When you're doing business management, you always do function before form. Unfortunately, with local government reforms, we've always done structures before function. So we rush out and restructure everything and sort of sort out the functions later. What we're doing now, and the other rule of business is you never do a structural reform parallel to a function reform. But it's exactly what we're doing with local government. We're doing major structural reforms and major function reforms in parallel, and we're going to end up with a dog's breakfast. I really am deeply concerned. And Three Waters is an example of that. Again, it's got the co-governance element. It strips away powers of local government. They say it's for efficiency, for funding of infrastructure, but all that it was is that we didn't have proper, like it doesn't make it any cheaper. You've still got X amount of dollars to spend to put in that infrastructure in place, whether it's roading or pipes in the ground for your water and sewage. And government acknowledges that it has to find a different way to fund local government, but instead what's been happening in the last few years is they've just centralised everything back to central government and virtually emasculated local government. And I really fear for the future of local government. I don't know what the future regional councils are. No one does. But it's very hard to try and map a functioning form through the mess that we're currently in. So, sorry to be pessimistic, but I thought it was good to share that with you just so that you can appreciate the significance of some of the reforms that have taken place at the moment. So I've probably spoken long enough, Bruce, but happy to field any questions.
Going back to your roading, I've lived in Tauranga all my life and I've seen what happened, and I've seen that the early planning was the Mangatapu extension was supposed to come through the Barks Corner.
Yeah.
They bought all of the 4 lanes of the Mangatapu Bridge. They've got the land all, you can see it now right through the Mangatapu. It was going down 15th Avenue, but that could be ring road right around to a majority of traffic. It's going to be a real bottleneck down the bottom, and all that traffic's going to hit down Cameron Road and try and get over the bridge.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the obvious one is to the 6 lane from Kawariko out to back to Barks Corner, but then you'll have to do exactly what you're saying. You'll then have to link back through to Mangatapu, Welcome Bay, with something that matches it. Yeah.
What about Judas Tunnel?
Under the Kaimais?
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been a bad idea, would it?
Why aren't councils advocating the government to get, say, 30% of the GST that's collected in their area to use?
Oh, they absolutely are. This is a hoary old chestnut, and that's been really on the table, because the property rating base is just getting narrower and narrower and narrower, and the functions and needs are getting greater, greater and greater, and it just doesn't cut the mustard anymore. But it's got to be a bigger picture of how do you fund infrastructure, and GST is one instrument that could well work for that. Not make rates exempt GST, that's silly, because GST should be on everything. It's then a question of how you allocate and share the GST, and there's all sorts of smart ways and incentivisation that you can do with infrastructure and with consenting, where you can actually, that GST would go to the local government rather than the central coffers. So it's certainly a very valid topic, or very current topic.
Re the co-governance in RMA, what stage is the legislation at the moment, and will a change of government be able to make a difference?
I'd like to say government can always make a difference, and yes they can, they have the power to legislate. It comes back to their resolve and their determination, and you see sort of governments that in opposition rail against things, and then they get into power and they just go bar and carry it on or make it worse. So it comes down to that determination and commitment to actually address some of these issues, but you've got to do it in a clever way. You know, it's got to be principle based, and it's got to be from a very high level. And I think the starting point has to be this conversation that this country hasn't had, and that's the constitutional aspect of what is our open democracy. Are we a dual ethnicity country? Are we a multi-ethnic society? Are our laws, Article 3, are we all have common rights and responsibilities and duties under common and statutory law or not? Because the way it's going, it's becoming a dog's breakfast.
Wasn't that what Waitangi Tribunal was meant to do?
Yes, but I'd have to say it's been captured, and it did do it for, up until the last 15, 20 years. The Waitangi Tribunal was a very responsible body. And don't get me wrong, the Article 2 settlements were very justified. The settler governments did some outrageous things to Maori land, and that was the Article 2 property rights issue. And as a nation, since the 1970s, we've come a long way, very successfully actually in a big picture sense, in settling those, and I'm very supportive of them. But it's the Article 1 stuff about single sovereignty and the Article 3 about common rights and responsibilities and duties before the law. They're the aspects that concern me. Margaret.
Would you like to comment on two things? State Highway 29, and you started at a Manawa Bridge, and the people who live up the Kaimais, who you heard speaking, and their need to actually be heard by NZTA.
Yeah, there's some very dangerous entry points that Margaret's championed above a Manawa, right up to the top. Very dangerous entry points, and NZTA are mindful of those, and they're going to have to make sure that there's safer entry and exit points on all of those.
they refuse to come to the meeting, and then it's only with leaning on them as hard as one could that they've agreed to meet with the local people.
Yeah. I don't blame the NZTA staff actually. They are bound to do the bidding of government, and they've got no money, so they can't offer any solutions. They're struggling to put together these other packages. So yeah, that's their dilemma.
Yes, knowing that they were interested in road safety though, Ken. My second question is on the representation review. And the gentleman said before that we were all a political organisation, but I thought it would be a good idea if we got Winston Peters and Shane Jones to come down and talk about the treaty and what it is to be actually, how we can actually resolve the code governance issue, which is taking away totally our democratic process.
Who are those people? I've never heard of.
Oh yeah, we can't do it without Winston.
The other thing that amazes me, we've got 2 of the 3 toll roads in town.
Yeah. Well, 2 of the 3 in the country.
Yeah. Why they put one on the Waikato Expressway?
Absolutely.
The Wellington Expressway.
Yep.
All new roads, if they told them, they'd have all this money to spend.
Absolutely. It's just political nonsense. I had 10 years with the Road Transport Forum before we sort of came up and resettled back up here. And as a trucking industry, very supportive of toll roadings because, you know, it's no different than the Land Transport Fund, the hypothecated fund. You paid it through your motor registration and your rucks and your petrol tax. And the most efficient way to do it with modern technology is toll roading. It's a pricing mechanism. Nothing's free. It's a question of how you pay for it. But somehow as a country we start to think, oh no, our roads should be free. But they're not free. You're paying $2.6 billion whatever dollars for these projects through your taxes. So toll roading means that the user pays, and that changes behaviour, and you can have congestion charging. Once you have toll roading established, you can put pricing signals for congestion pricing, which gives people a choice and selection of when they use the road and how much of the road they use over what time distance. So very sensible, but the current legislation, a lot of people in government think, oh no, we can't toll roads, it's unfair on the unemployed, or it's unfair on this and it's unfair on that. Well,
no, I might not get voted in.
well, I might not get voted in, but it's all around the world that it's toll roading. It works very well, very efficiently, and it's just a nonsense. Our current legislation actually forbids you from building a toll road unless there's an alternative. Well, in fact, if you're going to have a toll road, you don't want an alternative, you know. But be that as it may.
But it's only fair if it gets applied equally across the country.
Yes, that's true. But yes,
like it's grossly unfair.
The transmission gully, you know, 27 kilometres, a fantastic piece of kit. Many of you have probably driven it, and then that's got the Kapiti Expressway for a similar distance beyond that, and now right through to Otaki. That lends itself to toll roading. You can only really apply toll roading where you can channel it. You can't have a whole entry and exit points where people can avoid the toll. But the Eastern Toll Link works well. You know, $2.10, $2.40. Sorry now, $2.30. It's gone up as of 1st of July. But I mean, you save that in fuel. If you had to wind around through Te Puke and Tangiwan all around there, you'd save that money in fuel. Just so those who benefit should pay.
And in terms of long-term planning and traffic, how much sense is there in spending a lot of money and still depending on the Karangahaki Gorge as a route?
Yeah, Karangahaki Gorge on Highway 2 is always going to be a choke point. And the governments, successive governments, have always favoured Highway 29, and they've tried to direct all the freight as much as they can on Highway 29. The problem with it is when you head out of Tauranga, we're part of the Golden Triangle, the main freight's Auckland, Hamilton, Auckland, particularly Auckland, Tauranga. If you're heading out on 29, you're heading due south. And it's 27 kilometres further on Highway 29 than it is through Karangahaki Gorge. And the problem with our freight contracts is that road transport freight, they're fiercely competitive and they're price takers. They don't set the price, they're price takers. And all the contracts are on the shortest distance. So any freight company that decides to go on Highway 29, their customer will only pay them on the 27 kilometres shorter. And that's sort of one of the problems. It's just a function of commerce and pricing, and the lack of, well, the competitive nature of our transport sector, which is good, it makes it very efficient, but it does mean they're price takers.
If there was a proper motorway linking Auckland, Hamilton and Tauranga with an offshoot to Rotorua.
Yep. Well, we've done pretty well. I don't know if you've been from sort of, you know, on that Waikato bypass now, when you bypass Huntly, Narrawong, right through to Cambridge, it's a wonderful road. It's just absolutely fantastic.
Why not bring that through?
Well, that is the ultimate intention. The intention is to bring it right through from where it finishes this side of Cambridge now, right through to the foot of the Kaimais, but also it's working back down the other way on from the T-Rail down to Taupo and moving north from Wellington. We've made huge progress under the RONS project right through to Levin now. So Wellington-Levin is like a separated 4-lane motorway the whole way, and now from Auckland right down to Cambridge is a 4-lane motorway. And they've actually got design plans for the long distant future of all those ugly sister dips on the desert road, viaduct flyovers for all of them. So the long-term plans are there, it's just our ability to pay for it. Oh, that's the one. Right.
Okay, thanks, Ken. I'd have to say I came with a reasonably positive attitude, but after listening to you, I'm not quite sure how things are going to pan out around here, particularly if we're sidelined again in terms of access to and from Omokoroa to Tauranga. But thank you very much. It's better to be informed than uninformed, and for that I think we should all give you a round of applause.
Coming up.
Sir, could I just add to that Ken Shirley appears anywhere and everywhere. And I admitted to say that on that 23rd up at Kaimai, Ken was there and he spoke, and everybody appreciates it wherever he goes. And I think one of the things that's absolutely wonderful is that he's not 25 and he's not 35, but he's experienced and he has the ability to speak out and to represent us, and we're just so lucky to have him.
Agreed. So, looking at a few months ahead, we've got the general election, so we will definitely be getting all the candidates from the major parties to speak, and hopefully we'll get a good turnout and a good round of questioning, because there are a lot of things that Ken has raised that should be voting issues. There's the representational review for the councils, in other words, how the councillors in the wards are going to be split up. That's something I think everyone will want some input into, so it's not going to be a quiet year. So on that note, I'll draw this meeting to a close, and thank you.